As recorded by James Madison, Franklin stated, "In the contest with Great Britain, we had daily prayer in this room for divine protection. Our prayers, sir, were heard and graciously answered. And now, have we forgotten that powerful friend? Or do we imagine we no longer need his assistance?"
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on Gentlemen. In Hebrews chapter 11, we have this great hall of faith. This chapter here that we're reminded of the great faith of many. We see names like Abel and Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Rahab, and others. But often neglected as we review this chapter are those who were mentioned that were martyred for their faith. I mean, we learn in verse 37 of those who were stoned, some that were slain with the sword, and others that were experiencing great persecution. I mean, beatings of people that home areas and wandering about. I mean, this is a foreign concept to us who live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Yet daily, ladies and gentlemen, there are people who are laying down their lives for the cause of Christ. The day of the Christian martyr is June 29th, and here to discuss it with us today, we welcome back Todd Nettleton, the Chief of Media Relations and Message Integration for Voice of the Martyrs. He's host of the Voice of the Martyrs Radio and author of When Faith is Forbidden, 40 Days on the Front Lines with Persecuted Christians. Todd, thanks for joining us here today on Crosstalk.
You are so welcome, Jim. It's good to be with you.
How was it determined to make June 29th the day of the Christian martyr?
Well, according to church history, that is traditionally the day when the execution of Paul happened outside the city of Rome. And so it seemed like, if you're going to talk about people who laid down their lives for Christ, certainly a good one to start with is the Apostle Paul. And so June 29th was the date that we selected and said, hey, we have the International Day of Prayer for Persecuted Christians in November. That's when we pray for Christians who are still fighting the good fight, are still facing persecution. But what if we had a day where we really looked at the example of those who paid that ultimate price and lost their lives for the sake of Christ and for the sake of advancing his kingdom? That's how the Day of the Christian Martyr came into being, and that's why it's June 29th.
Okay, well, and we well familiar with the verses. I fought a good fight, finished my course, kept the faith, and talked about that crown of righteousness that was laid up, and he was ready to be offered, lay out his life as a drink offering before God. But, Todd, sometimes we falsely believe that as long as I'm a child of God, that God is obligated to keep me from harm's way. Could you burst our bubble on this false narrative?
I can certainly burst your bubble, but I think the book of Acts would also burst it. As, Jesus said, the world hates me, and if you follow me, the world will hate you too. So the idea that somehow following Christ is going to make us popular or make us safe is completely contradictory to exactly what he promised. I mean, he said the world will hate you, but the other thing he said, though, is you don't have to worry about that because I have overcome the world. And so even in times of suffering, even when the world is against us, we have that promise that Christ has already overcome the world.
You have been sounding the alarm for many, many years about those who are suffering on account of their faith. Do you believe that people of America have come to the point where they fully grasp what believers are going through around the world and what they're facing?
I don't think I would say that we fully grasp it, but we certainly have a much more accurate picture than we did when I started at Voice of the Martyrs 23 years ago. I think more Americans are aware of what's happening overseas, and I also think as American Christians and as we have watched our own culture change over the last 20 years, it doesn't seem quite as far off as maybe it did 23 years ago to think about, oh, wait a minute, I might have to pay a price for following Christ. This might cost me something. I think for American Christians who kind of have their eyes open on our culture, that's not such a far-fetched idea as maybe it was a generation ago.
As you know, we're getting numbers every day on how many have died from COVID or how many are dying because of gunshot wounds, but I have yet to hear a national newscast give us a daily deaths on those who are martyred for their faith. Can you reveal such numbers to us?
There are numbers that are out there. Voice of the Martyrs doesn't really tie ourselves to any of them. Anybody who says an answer to that question, at best, it is an educated guess. When you think about countries like North Korea, when you think about China, when you think about Eritrea, it is not, these countries are getting an annual report of Christians were executed this year, or here's how many Christians died in police custody after being beaten this year. So it is very hard to say a specific number. But there are hundreds laying down their lives for the cause of Christ, and they are our family members. These are our brothers and sisters that this is happening to.
Todd Nettleton with us today from Voice of the Martyrs. Our topic today, Counting the Cost, the Day of the Christian Martyr. And Todd, this year you were informing the world of a woman that was martyred by Marxist guerrillas in Colombia. Her name is Rocio Pino. Tell us about her.
Rocio Pino was a Christian woman in an area of Colombia that is controlled by the Marxist FARC guerrillas. She actually was a witness for Christ in that area. Her and her husband made the decision to stay